I think we're in the early stages of a depression, and the expert class that's running Wall Street and who's in Washington and who's operating traditional mainstream media outlets, I think they're gaslighting all of us into believing that the economy isn't really as bad as we think it is. And I think this is really important going into this new year because I think rapidly deteriorating economic conditions are going to be what push people to the extreme. So we're already seeing political violence explode. We're seeing polarization just completely amplify, and I think it's only going to get worse as people are pushed to the extremes as they can't afford food, they lose their jobs, they can't afford groceries, and they have nowhere else to go. So I want to dive into this video by A Homestead Journey. She does a really great job compiling clips from folks on social media. And I want to dive into this because a lot of these folks are sharing their own personal stories and experiences of applying to jobs. And I think this points to where we are heading. I don't think jobs are going to magically come back anytime soon. So if you are curious about where we're heading, start looking at jobs as a compass to point you in the direction where I think we're heading politically, socially, culturally in this country.
I've applied to over 150 jobs.
I've applied to 500 jobs this year and not heard back from any of them.
We have some pretty horrible economic news. United States layoffs are now surging to their highest point since the pandemic.
The big companies are the first wave, the medium companies are the second wave, and smaller companies are the third wave.
I worked for this company for 4 years. This just came out of nowhere.
I think there's an idea that if people are too broke to focus on anything other than just trying to survive, maybe they won't push back.
So we're right at the end of 2025, and already a lot of companies are coming out saying that in the beginning of next year, 2026, they are already projecting to do mass layoffs. And there are several big companies that are already saying this. I'm going to get into that in just a moment. But first, I want to let you know about a new channel my husband and I have started. It actually is a podcast called The New Exodus. And I really want to encourage anybody that is interested in real solutions for real people in this ever-changing world to go ahead and go over there, check out the episodes, and give us a follow because we are going to be covering a lot in this upcoming year, and we're so excited to basically do this new channel. I love to talk about all of these things that I always cover on this channel right now, but my husband is very passionate about so many topics, and he is just, I love talking with him about all of these things. So I really recommend going ahead and checking out that channel. I'll put the link down below. Again, it's called The New Exodus Podcast. We'll be filming every single week, and I hope to see you there. But first, let's go ahead and get into this video.
Definitely give her a follow. And if you're interested in her podcast, definitely check it out. They do, I think, a really good job. Like I said, compiling a lot of this kind of information and just bringing it to the public awareness.
You guys, this is really scary. U.S. layoffs right now are set to surpass the Great Recession and on track to be the worst since the Great Depression. And I'm telling you, they're doing everything in their power to cover up the real jobs numbers. So what's really going on? Are we already in a depression? And when I went and fact-checked this...
So I think we are already in a depression, and part of the reason why I think that is the case is because the economy actually never recovered from the recession in 2008. So if you were living in a major financial or cultural center place like New York City or Washington, D.C. or San Francisco, like you were really insulated from what happened, and just because like you weren't on the front lines of it, right? Like you weren't exposed to people losing jobs. You weren't losing your job, right? You weren't exposed to factory closures. A lot of these people are working in professional class jobs. Big tech was starting to take off. I mean, think about it. The iPhone and the App Store had just been created in the late 2000s. And by the early 2010s, you had the proliferation of apps like Uber and Instagram and all these tech unicorns that we take for granted today. So there was an abundance of jobs for people in those areas, but for everyone else in the country, there really wasn't anything. I've talked about this before in other videos, but I read the book Janesville, Wisconsin, and the closure of the GM plant there. And that, I think, is a really good case study of what happened across America. You had a lot of people who were working good, stable, in many cases unionized, blue collar jobs on production floors across the country. Those factories shuttered, and everyone was told, go learn to code, go get, a new job. And that didn't actually happen. A lot of the new jobs that replaced those factory jobs were warehouse jobs where you were making slightly above minimum wage. So it started at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. And I think that's why the elite classes that live in places like San Francisco and New York and DC were completely oblivious to it because they've been living in a bubble. But I think if you've been on Main Street in America for any period of time in the last 2 decades, you have certainly seen a deterioration in economic conditions. And again, I think the media and the political apparatus and the elites kind of they gaslit us, right? Because they weren't seeing it for themselves. So clearly it wasn't happening. And because they don't associate with, random people, blue collar people on a day-to-day basis, they have no idea what's actually happening in their own country. If you surround yourself with other college educated professional class people and you've never talked to a blue collar worker, you've never talked to someone who worked on a factory floor and lost their job, like you wouldn't have any insight into what was happening. And so now I think the dominoes are starting to fall where because of AI and because of greater automation, those lower level white collar workers are going to start feeling the brunt of this. And of course, like the elites who are controlling things at the top, they're going to be fine for now. But you're starting to see a cascading effect upward where the people at the bottom of, I guess, the job food chain, they're going to start losing their jobs en masse. They're going to start looking for new jobs, and you're seeing a growth. And because it's now spread to white collar professional jobs, it's no longer just working class blue collar jobs. I think this is why people are starting to take notice, and she's absolutely right. The government has been lying about the data. I mean, just last year, there's a ton of revisions done at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There were separate job reports that came out when the government was closed back in October, November. And those private sector job reports revealed what I think everyone knew, that the economy isn't adding the jobs we think it is. In fact, it's losing jobs. So not only are the people running things completely oblivious to what's happening, at this point, they're actively lying about it. And I think that's because a lot of these people are also invested in companies that blue collar Main Street Americans buy from. So they have a strong incentive to protect their investments, and they want to keep the charade of everything's fine and dandy going, because if we stop spending money because we're feeling a pinch, they're going to stop earning returns on their investments, right? So they have an incentive, a lot of these people, to gaslight and lie to us. But I think reality is reality. The jobs don't exist that we think they do, and we're not able to keep consuming at the rates that the economy has been designed for us to consume at. And so I think things are rapidly deteriorating. And for a lot of people, especially folks who, aren't making 6-figure jobs and are looking for work, I think depression circumstances have already set in.
It says yes. Layoffs have surpassed 1.1 million through November. So that's, we still have a month left to go. Let's see how many layoffs can we get before the end of the year. We haven't seen this level of job loss since the start of the pandemic, which was obviously a horrifying time for our country, the economy, the world. And this here is also putting a lot of the onus onto AI, that companies are attempting to adopt AI to replace human beings. And again, I'd like to ask those companies, who will buy your products?
The answer to that question is kind of simple. We're moving past and beyond a product and consumer-based economy, which is going to be incredibly destabilizing for a lot of people. But I think, if you just look at the world around you, like you just look at social media, look at what you buy, look at where you shop, like everything is like Chinese made slop. It's garbage. Nothing is essential. Nothing is really needed. And so for much of the, the past couple decades, that's all we've been consuming. It's been lifestyle content peddled to us, like lifestyle branded products that have been marketed to us on social media. And we've all just been gobbling it up and buying it. And obviously now we don't have any more money to spend. So that's coming to an end. So they're not looking, these big companies aren't looking towards us continuing to buy things. We're moving into an attention economy. So they're looking to harvest our data. They're looking to harvest our eyeballs. There's a reason why some of these companies have moved into essential services. Take Amazon as a great example. Amazon, everyone knows, is the largest e-commerce retailer in the country, right? They're not just an e-commerce retailer. They are the largest distribution network in the country. And last year, they kind of like went through a divorce with UPS and the Postal Service. And they're going to start charting their own course. And it's going to be quite possible within this year or the following year where instead of taking mail or taking a package to the post office, you might just ship things through Amazon because they already have a massive nationwide distribution network in place. So they have warehousing and distribution. Obviously, AWS, huge. They're an entertainment platform because they have Amazon Prime. They purchase Whole Foods, so they're providing grocery, and they're getting into health. And health is big. If you haven't been paying attention to what they're doing in health, they're offering telemedicine, and they're partnered with One Medical, and they're doing health. They own Ring, the camera service that almost every house in America has. So Amazon isn't just a company that sells products and services and then collects a fee every time something is sold on their platform. They're a much bigger company than that. So they're not these big companies don't really rely on you and I to buy things anymore. They're more interested in the data and the information we can provide, and then converting that into either essential services or into attention and things we can consume with our eyeballs, things that we don't necessarily need to buy.
Just got off a Teams call at work. I got a meeting invite this morning called Team Update. There was about 15 people on the call. Our VP just terminated our positions. I'm feeling really upset about it. In tech right now, a lot of layoffs are happening. Who knows, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. I like my job, I enjoyed my job, but I didn't love it as much as I used to. And I know that you're not supposed to always love your job. A job is a job. A job is to make money so that you can provide for your family. And I was very fortunate to have that job and to work with all the people there and learn all the things, level up my abilities. Thursday, I didn't think today was gonna be like this.
We're not even midway through December yet, and I've had at least 4 friends call and tell me that they've lost their jobs. And then I got called for one of my jobs, and they are cutting the rate basically almost in half. One of my friends specifically I know was replaced, her position was replaced by AI. That's not even the worst part. The worst part is healthcare going up and the cost of heating going up. It's set to almost double by January. And the most infuriating is this whole shrinkflation thing. The prices don't always seem to have gone up at the stores. Like, I buy a ton of Christmas candy to give to everyone during the holiday season, and I went to buy what I normally buy, and I got about half for the same price. But I buy the same product, but then I open the bag and it's half of what it used to be. And if they don't do that because they can't do that, then the price goes up. So essentially, almost everything is about twice as expensive, and tons of people are not even working. And people who are maybe making way less. I think there's an idea that if people are too broke to focus on anything other than just trying to survive, maybe they won't push back. And I think anyone who thinks that is gravely mistaken.
So she brings up a really good point with regard to the rising cost of living, in that people are working at lower wages now in order to pay more, and they're getting less in return. So last year, I'm a super nerd, and I created an itemized spreadsheet of every single thing I bought at the grocery store. Literally, anytime I went to the grocery store, I brought the receipt home. I logged everything in my spreadsheet, so I could see change over time in real time. And let me tell you, whatever they're saying, the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Federal Reserve and all the official data about the economy and how it's operating right now, it's completely baseless. Yeah, sure, some things haven't gone up in price. That's true, but a lot of things have. A great example is I buy 1 pound blocks of cheddar cheese from the store, and at the beginning of last year, it was $4.29 for a 1 pound block of cheddar cheese, and by October, November, it was $4.99, which is what, like a 17% increase. So that's not the 3% or whatever that they're talking about. So I've done this across a multitude of different items. I mean, it's gotten to the point where, and when I go to Costco, I'm super frustrated because the prices are never consistent. And again, like, I'm keeping a log of things, so I know when cashews were $16 the last time I was here, and now they're almost $18. I'm paying attention to this. So this is happening. So inflation, greed, a lot of reasons for this, but the out-of-pocket cost you are paying to buy essentials like food is going up. But what she noted in that video is that at the same time, wages for workers is going down. So it's not just that wages haven't kept up with the rising cost of living, it's that wages are actually declining in real time. So in some cases, you lose your job. So maybe you're making $100,000 a year, you lose your job, you can't find a new one, you have to take a job working, for $15 an hour at a retail store. So that is an example. A good example from the book I referenced before, Janesville, it documents several individuals this was the problem, where they were making $35, $38 an hour working on the GM factory floor in Janesville, Wisconsin. When Janesville closed their factory, the factory's closer, there wasn't an equivalent job paying that same wage in the town. So what workers were left with were a bunch of $12 to $16 an hour jobs. So what this means is not only are you paying more, but you're actually paying substantially more because you're paying with less money. So if you're only making $15 an hour, that doesn't go as far as if you're making $35, $40, $45 an hour, right? So people are definitely feeling the pinch here. And like she said, this is where people are going to react when people can't afford basic things like your health insurance, your heating bill, and that too is going up in large part because of the data centers, especially if you heat with electric. That's a big thing that's affecting a lot of people. If you can't afford groceries, if you can't afford the basic things, we're not talking about not being able to afford lattes anymore or not being able to afford DoorDash. It's like you can't afford to put food on the table. You can't afford to keep a roof over your head. You can't afford to keep the lights on. At the same time, there are no jobs left for people who need them. There's a rapidly decreasing number of ways to earn money. And yes, you can start a business, and I promote this and I advocate for this. It takes time for that to get off the ground though, right? So you can start a business, you can start a side hustle, you can work for yourself. It's going to take time. So people need jobs now. They don't have the savings to cover an immediate job loss. They don't have that. And now they can't find alternative jobs to replace the ones they've lost.
Something that I'm realizing people who aren't currently in this job market are not understanding. That I want to spell out very plainly for you. When we say there are no jobs, we're talking about jobs in general. Like legitimately, any kind of job. There are more job seekers than jobs. And that is not just white collar jobs. That is not just mid-management jobs. That is not just leadership level jobs. Those are jobs. When you hear someone say, I've applied to 500 jobs this year and not heard back from any of them, do you honestly think that's only 500 jobs only in their niche, at their level? I've applied to 600 jobs. There is no way in hell that there have been 600 jobs that are like director level or above for employer brand and talent marketing. No, I have been applying all over the place to anything that even remotely aligns with my experience. And not just that, I've been applying to anything. It took me, I had to go back and count. It was like 22 applications to hourly part-time retail job before I got through on anything. When people are saying they're applying to hundreds of jobs, they're talking about jobs in general. And I think this is where a lot of job seeker frustration is coming from, because
So I'm actually working on a special side project related to this. I have been applying to part-time retail jobs because I suspect this is actually the case where, like she said, it's not just the jobs you want, the director level or the white collar office job that you want. It's all jobs across the board. So I have a theory that even at the part-time hourly level, there's no hiring going on as well. And that's because consumers are no longer consuming at the rates they once did. So a lot of places are pulling back, and they're not providing as many job opportunities as they did in the past. And so let me give you an example. So I was applying to several different types of jobs. I started with barista jobs because I have a background as a barista and have that on my resume. So this is an example of a job I applied to. This is an active posting for the job that's open on their website. I applied to this job back in December. I went in and I interviewed. During the interview, I learned that this job was particularly looking for someone who could work a minimum of 24 hours a week, so 4 of their shifts per week. And it was ideally looking for someone who could quickly be promoted into a like key holder supervisor position, which is not anything that is declared here in this job description. This is just front of house barista, basic. You're going to be trained to do cashier, busser, patio attendant or barista. So you're just going to be trained across front of house. Pretty basic, pretty simple, right? It claims that you'll make between $19 and $24 an hour. What I learned during the interview is that they actually pay $7.25 an hour. So they're only paying minimum wage. While the workers do earn typically a minimum of $19, and it was averaging when I interviewed with them between like $22 and $25 an hour. That's all based on tips, right? So they tip pool at this particular cafe. And so for those of you who haven't worked service industry jobs, I personally hate tip pooling because a lot of times you work with people who slack. And so the ones who pull their weight or go above and beyond end up getting the short end of the deal when they have to share tips with other folks who aren't working as hard. That's just my personal beef with tipping tip pools. But regardless, you're also seeing right now a pullback in dining out because people are really tired with subpar service, and you're seeing a pullback as well with tipping, and because there's just tipping fatigue across the board. And so the entirety of your income at a job like this is dependent on the generosity of folks leaving a tip, and as that declines, like their incomes as well will decline. But I interviewed with them and they said, thanks for interviewing with us. We found someone else who better aligned with what they were looking for. I wasn't looking for 24 hours a week, so they didn't offer me the job. But this is a great example of you have businesses who just keep these job openings listed all the time. They don't really declare what they're looking for on these job postings. So sometimes they're fake, sometimes they're not. But they're not actually reflective of the demands of the actual retail service economy. I also applied at a couple other places. I will say I got 2 callbacks for other places. One is a well-known coffee chain that I've also previously worked for. They did 2 rounds of interviews, which I thought was really bizarre. After the second round of interview, I followed up and they completely ghosted me. So that's happening at the retail level too. And these aren't jobs that, are paying buco bucks. These are $15, $20 an hour jobs. So I can see where she's going, that she's completely, she's right on point here. I think a lot of people don't realize this is affecting the part-time retail sector as well. So I'm going to continue applying to positions, and I'm going to rack up some data on what I get back in terms of just what the actual demand is compared to what's being reported on these public-facing job postings on these businesses' websites, but also just to give you a sense of, okay, well, what are these places actually paying as well? Because you're not earning as much as you need to survive. It's really difficult to make it off of a $15 to $20 an hour job, especially when you have to pay taxes on it. So I'm going to be working on that report. I'm going to be publishing it for subscribers on Substack. So if you're interested in that, it'll be coming out later this spring. Definitely go subscribe on Substack, and I will be sharing more about that there.
Because people who are not in it keep coming at us with like, we'll just go apply at a restaurant. We'll just go substitute teach. We'll just go drive Uber Eats. We'll just go get a retail job. We'll just go drive a forklift. We'll just go apply to an Amazon warehouse. Like those jobs, all jobs, all jobs, all jobs, all jobs. There's not a lot of them. And just because you can go to a job board and see a bunch of things listed, those aren't real jobs.
Exactly.
Like so much of what is out there online right now is fucking fake. Fake in a number of different ways. I did a whole video about the different types of ghost jobs that exist, but like there are so few real jobs where people are taking applications, interviewing, and then hiring a person to fill that role.
It's not even just that. I also published a piece a couple of years ago in Business Insider about how a lot of your big national chain fast food restaurants are starting to use AI chatbots to screen applicants. So I had an instance where I applied to a fast food chain online. I was automatically scheduled in their system to go for an interview. I showed up for the interview. It was the manager's day off. So the scheduling software that they were using with the AI assistant and the actual day-to-day operations of the restaurant itself were completely disconnected. So I showed up and there was no one there. But what struck me about that encounter was that even though I was physically there in person and I showed up, there was not a single human being at that facility who could talk to me or who could help me get a job. Like I still had to go through a computer in order to get the job. And this is what is becoming more and more problematic. I mean, even when I was a teenager in the 2000s, right? There were still places taking paper applications. You could still walk into a place and ask if they had jobs and apply in person and talk to someone and get hired that day. You can't do that anymore. A lot of places are using, obviously, applicant tracking systems, but they're also using AI screeners and AI tools to manage the flow of applicants that are coming their way. So there's a huge barrier to entry to even getting jobs in the first place. I'd be curious to know if any of you as well have applied to any part-time retail jobs, if you found this to be true, where it's like you can't just walk into a restaurant anymore and ask to apply to a job. You have to apply via some website. A lot of times these places are owned by different like hospitality groups, or you have to go apply online. You have to take a test. I've applied at Whole Foods before. There's a test for that. I mean, I've heard the Walmart test. Walmart is incredibly hard to pass. It's like the percentage of applicants that Walmart takes, I believe, is lower than what Harvard accepts into their freshman class, which is just wild to think about. But there's a lot that use tests to screen applicants before they even will entertain your resume. So I'd be curious to know if you've encountered these digital barriers to entry to work and getting just hourly jobs and how that has affected you.
And this is where, a lot of us feel like we're being gaslit by the rest of you. And why we say things like, if you're not in it, just stop having an opinion. Because this is not like it used to be. This is so different. And it's so different for a number of reasons. One, yes, we have been in recessions before where there have been more people out of work than there were jobs available. That has happened before. But what hasn't happened necessarily is the proliferation of AI.
Exactly.
Because part of the reason why AI is such a problem with the job search is screening candidates who come through And also the fact that your resume gets buried because of the number of AI chatbots that send out fake resumes. That is
another
a big problem on the recruiter side. They get hundreds of applications from fake people that come through AI bots. Okay, so AI is fucking up the market. But like, AI is our savior. That's one problem. Another problem is the fact that in the US, our government is refusing to acknowledge what is happening. They are refusing to release numbers. Or
this is really true as well. I've done a separate video on this. Bernie Sanders is the only person in Congress that I have seen who is coming out and talking about this, talking about how AI and automation is going to wipe out millions of jobs, and how we have no game plan in place to handle sudden job losses for a large swath of the population. And that's gonna be incredibly destabilizing, right? Like, our entire system is based on work. You get your social capital and your social value based on the type of job you have. I mean, that's why we have a distinction between white collar and blue collar work. There's a huge disdain for blue collar work because it's just socially not as prestigious as white collar work. And then even within white collar, there's different levels of prestige. So there's a prestige game that people are playing, and they get a lot of personal value, and their identities are really wrapped in it. Where you live, geographically speaking, has a lot to do with your job and where you work. I mean, the government, for heaven's sake, I mean, they collect taxes based on our income, right? So our entire tax code is predicated on taxing the incomes of workers. So if you lose your job, it's not just a financial hardship for you. It's when millions of people lose their jobs all at once. It's going to be a massive shock to our system politically, economically, socially. People are not going to know what to do, and everyone just assumes, well, I'll get unemployment or I'll, get food stamps. Well, those programs are rapidly running out of money. They cannot be sustained anymore. And now that fraud has been uncovered in Minnesota and likely other states as well, I suspect there's going to be a large push to shut down a lot of these programs, because it's very clear that the people who are supposed to be being helped by these programs clearly aren't. So there's a lot of problems right now, and this is going to be a big deal. So if people aren't talking about this, the policymakers who are supposed to be coming up with the solutions to these problems, if they're not even acknowledging it's happening, if the only person in Congress right now is Bernie Sanders talking about it, we're in a lot of trouble.
Or they are fudging the numbers because they need to look successful. And so there is not the level of urgency and visibility that we used to have in recessions on the job market. And then you also have this thing of like the sheer number of fake jobs. I mean, they have done surveys, they have done studies that like something like over 40% of recruiters have said, yes, I have put out fake jobs before. For a number of reasons. They have a ton of LinkedIn, or Indeed slots that they have to fill, so they just put anything out, or they need to do it to look like the company is in growth, or they're just trying to gather some kind of a talent pool without being transparent about what they're doing. This is why we feel like we're going crazy. This is why we feel like we're being gaslit. And I am just urging those of you that are not in it, stop telling everyone to do all these things that don't work anymore. Go apply to a restaurant job. Well, that restaurant job has 120 applications for that one server job, and 80 of those are people with decades of serving experience. I'm not going to get that job. And I'm not even going to, because this is already like almost 6 months long, I'm not going to get into like how to even sustain your life on the wages that exist right now. But again, job seekers, I know you're being gaslit. I know you're frustrated. I know you keep hearing baseless, unhelpful advice. I see you. I'm right there with you. We can't all just drive Uber Eats and become plumbers or nurses or waiters. I got you. We'll get through it.
The job market has lost its mind.
So notice that up until this point in time, this has been exclusively women sharing their frustration with losing jobs in the state of the job market. This could be just how the clips were cut and put together, but I think this is indicative of a much bigger trend. I think women are going to be the ones on the forefront of this, because when you think of the food chain, if you will, the job food chain, women are at the lower end. Women tend to work a lot of easier administrative roles, back office roles. They're in things like marketing, brand partnerships like that last woman, HR. They're in jobs that are already actively being outsourced to AI tools. And frankly, because those jobs, a lot of the women aren't actually working as hard as they think they are. They're not putting in a full 40-hour week. They're not even going above and beyond. Employers are looking at that, and they're cutting their losses. And so I think women are going to be at the forefront of this, and they frankly aren't prepared. And I think that's because feminism has created, especially career feminism, has created a worldview for these women where they think themselves to be highly credentialed and therefore highly entitled and deserving of prestigious jobs, or certain jobs that entail a lifestyle that they have deemed socially acceptable. And I don't think that they are willing to recognize that, one, career feminism lied to them, but two, that's not the real world. The real world isn't Sex in the City. You're not living this glamorous life working for Vogue magazine in New York. That's just not realistic, right? I think a lot of women are going to lose their jobs, and because the types of jobs they already work and they have experience in are going to be lost in other sectors of the economy, there's not going to be commensurate new jobs that they're going to need to go. They're going to be able to go to. So they're going to have to retrain. They're going to have to reskill. They're going to have to find something different. The problem is, because these women are highly credentialed, they believe that they are entitled to a specific job, so they don't want to do any more schooling because they've already done enough. A lot of them have advanced degrees. Like, what more can they possibly do? But then also, because of that, a lot of these women are also in debt. So even if they wanted to reskill, they're not going to have the financial resources to be able to do so. So I think women are going to be affected the most by this, financially and psychologically, because they're not going to be prepared to handle this transition, and they are going to be at the forefront of, I think, the bulk of the layoffs.
Because tell me why this actually makes no sense. This is how it used to be, okay? You walk in to the place where you want to work, okay? If they have like a hiring sign or whatever, you leave your resume there, the manager looks at it, they give you a call back to come in for an interview, they interview you, they get a vibe check, they make sure that everything you're saying is correct, they may call your references, whatever. If they like you, they hire you, right? That's how it used to go. What the hell is wrong? Why now is it like, okay, and I've heard everyone talk about this. I've heard everybody talk about this. It is, you apply online through like Indeed or like the company's website or whatever. You then wait 2-3 weeks maybe to hear back from the company on whether or not you have been selected to come in for an interview. At which point they will call you. If they've selected you, they will call you, have like, you know, a phone interview, vibe check over the phone. Great, you know. Next, you go in for an interview and, you know, they ask you whatever. So many different places do it differently. Okay, what the hell is up with round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5? What the hell are we doing 5 interviews for? Like, literally, I'm sorry, but like, are managers like not able to get a vibe anymore? Like, I just don't understand. Like, I've been a supervisor before and I have interviewed people. I don't know what is going on that people can't like make a decision. Like, it like is so clear when you're interviewing people whether or not, and I understand there are multiple candidates for one option. Okay, if you interview one candidate after another and they're very close, it's obvious which one it is, because you should be able to get a vibe check on people. Like, are we unable to do that now?
We have some.
So, like I said, I had been applying to a bunch of part-time places, and I did apply to a well-known coffee chain that I had previously worked for. So not only do I have experience working as a barista, but experience at this particular coffee chain. And there was 2 rounds of interviews, and that shocked me because I've never had multiple rounds of interviews like that. I've done like a phone screen and then an in-person, and sometimes the in-person I would do interviews with multiple different people. But I had never really had a process like that, especially for like a service retail job, a job where you're taking orders, you're steaming milk, pulling shots of espresso, adding a bunch of different other ingredients to pre-measured cups. Like, it's not rocket science. You're cleaning the floors, you're cleaning the toilet, like basic stuff here. Nothing that's crazy. And so the first interview was with the store manager. Great, fine. But then there was a second interview with the manager of like the entire district that oversaw that particular store. And I'm gonna be honest, like, I didn't really get a good vibe from that individual. The interview questions seemed to be more about like cultural fit, which I thought was a little strange, in my opinion. Again, like, if you're running a retail operation or you're in a service shop, like, you just need people to show up who can do the job. Like, I'm not looking to be at the company for a decade plus. This particular person had been working at this company for 12 years. Good for them. That's not my personal goal, but it seemed like they were looking for someone, again, working at a basic barista level, who could start there and work their way up and was really committed to the company. So that was a really, it was just bizarre. And I didn't really have a good feeling when I left the interview. So honestly, I'm not surprised I got ghosted by the manager. I'm a little annoyed because I did follow up, but not surprised. But the one thing that is really concerning about this, I think people should be aware of, is that because this district manager that I interviewed with oversees I think 9 or 10 stores in this particular region, that means I can't apply to any of those locations in this region either. So it doesn't just exclude me. It's not like I didn't get the job at this particular store. It's that all the other ones in my geographic vicinity where I applied at, I'm not going to be qualified for either, because I'm still going to have to interview with this person. And if the interview didn't go well, I don't know. I didn't get any feedback. But if the interview didn't go well with her, and that's the reason why I didn't get the job offer, then she's not going to pass me on any other ones, right? And so this is pretty concerning, because again, we're talking about, a $15 to $20 an hour hourly job working in the service industry, doing things like pulling shots of espresso for coffee and cleaning floors. We're not talking about someone who's going to be coding the next app for a mega unicorn company in San Francisco. So not necessarily vibe, but like cultural fit doesn't really matter as much, in my opinion. You need people who can show up and do the job. And we've moved past an employment in a labor market where employers are just looking for people who are willing to do the job and do the work. They want people who fit. And I think there's a lot of ideology driving many of these companies as well. And so that's part of it as well. If you don't check the right ideological boxes, you may find yourself locked out of employment opportunities, regardless of your work ethic.
Pretty horrible economic news. United States layoffs are now surging to their highest point since the pandemic. More than 1 million layoffs have happened in 2025, and that number is only set to grow. These numbers could exceed what we saw during the Great Recession, exceed what we saw in 2020. I mean, just horrible economic numbers right now. So in November, there were about 71,000 layoffs in the United States of America. That's only the third time since the Great Recession, according to News Nation, that layoffs have topped 70,000 in the month of November. In total, more than 1.1 million jobs have been cut this year. And that number is set to grow because we still have several weeks left this year. What we're seeing right now as we head into the end of the year is an economy that really is in decline. Although the stock market is performing relatively well, everyday Americans aren't necessarily feeling it, as you have a very, very weak job market.
So you hear all the time about how people are, like, all you see online is people's highlight reels, right? Well, it's about as real as it gets. I've applied to over 150 jobs. There's stuff that I have been overly qualified for. There's stuff that I should have been a shoo-in because I knew people. But if you want to talk about feeling so defeated, the jobs that I have been able to pick up, I'm really grateful for, and I've met amazing people. So I see God working in that. And they've blessed my life abundantly. I think the hard part is like knowing that I can't pay the bills. It feels like an impossible situation. So, that's my update today. I'm just really trying to figure out what it is that God's trying to show me in this season, because it's really hard on just about every front. So, yeah. All right, enough of me babbling on here.
I got fired today. I have never, ever in my life been fired from any job that I've ever had. 35 years old, so I've had a lot of jobs in my life. I just spent about an hour calling some family and friends and getting really emotional. I'm really scared, I think. I think that's really the one feeling that's going through my mind right now. I mean, there's no good time to be fired, but I have 2 little babies. Yeah, I'm just scared for Christmas. Just want to make their life magical. This is just horrible timing. I don't want to come out here and cry, but I just think I'm going to let myself feel like shit today and then be a strong, positive person tomorrow. This really sucks. This really sucks. It just came out of nowhere. I've been with this company. I worked for this company for 4 years. And this just came out of nowhere. No notice, I had zero inkling that this was going to happen. I mean, it's usually when you get fired, you have no idea that this is coming, but I feel like sometimes people who are fired kind of have some feeling in their gut that something's going to happen, but I did not see this coming in a million years. I found myself to be a very valuable employee. And if I'm being honest, I think they just can't afford me anymore. I know that's what a lot of people say, but this company, no negativity towards them. It's a great company, but they're kind of cheap. So I know that one day this will be a blessing. I'll be like, it was a blessing in disguise. But today I feel like complete dumpster trash, like complete shit. Probably gonna look like this for the next 3 to 5 business days. But I have amazing family around me and I have such good friends that I'm gonna get through this. And I know everything happens for a reason. So if anyone else is going through this at this time of the year, my heart goes out to you. I feel you. And peace out.
So it's possible she legitimately did get fired, just because her performance wasn't up to par. I think sometimes a lot of employees overinflate their value and the value that they provide to companies. And a lot of times your end of the year performance reviews, they're just a bunch of fluff anyways. So it's possible that happened, but I do think she could be right, that they couldn't afford her anymore. And one of the reasons why a company might fire you is because if you're fired rather than laid off, the company isn't liable to pay you severance, and they're not liable to pay you unemployment insurance benefits. And so it's it's a way for them to cut costs. And you've probably seen in the news over the last year a lot of people who were getting laid off, especially in the beginning of 2025, it was because of poor performance reviews. And so some legitimate, sure. Others, they were kind of like, where did this come from? And so that could be, it could be, maybe she was too expensive, or maybe just on the cusp of performing well, and that was sufficient for her employer to cut her. Regardless, there's a lot of trickery that employers can use in order to cut any sort of cost that they have to pay once you are unemployed. And I think unemployment insurance is one of the ways they try to get around that.
Yeah, get your financial houses in order. Because listen, I worked in corporate America 41 years. I've been laid off, reassigned, relocated, demoted, reorganized, all that stuff. And there's some things that are pretty common in corporate America, right? So right now you see the big companies like Amazon and UPS announcing layoffs, and Microsoft and a few others. Okay, the next wave is the smaller companies. They're not small like a mom and pop store. They're just smaller than Fortune 10, Fortune 50, like they're Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000. But they employ a lot of people, and layoffs are like dance fads. They just get popular all of a sudden. And these smaller companies will be like, listen, these big companies take the hit in the media, we can start laying off people too. Because what happens is,
I think this is because too, not to jump too far ahead, but a lot of these companies are market movers, or what I would consider market movers. So Amazon is the second largest private employer in the United States. So whatever Amazon does, other companies are going to have to follow suit. Other companies that work with Amazon or compete with Amazon are going to have to have layoffs as well to cut costs in order to stay competitive with Amazon on price, because Amazon is always going to push prices down wherever they can. So this is something to keep in mind. So while you might have only seen bigger companies like UPS and Amazon having layoffs in the news this past year, I think he's absolutely right. Other companies now are seeing what they did, and they've been spending the past couple months preparing their own layoff plans. So they're going to start executing on those this year. And then, of course, as costs, or as revenue dries up, because consumer spending is down, as credit becomes more difficult for smaller businesses to get, they're going to engage in layoffs as well.
companies can make their books look better by the end of the year if they get rid of salaries and benefits.
Yep.
And then that prepares them for a first quarter. And they think, well, if we could start fast in the first quarter, we can get a lot of things. We can get our money to look good and blah, blah, blah. And then in January, they'll be like, oh, you know what? We didn't get out to the good start that we thought. They start laying off again in February. So if you are in corporate America right now, I am just saying, get your financial house in order, because the big companies are the first wave, the medium companies are the second wave, and smaller companies are the third wave. And we're still in that first wave and it's not finished. And unfortunately, as an employee, you don't have any control over that. You don't. I mean, there's a little bit of things you could do. You can be a good employee and be productive and all this kind of stuff, good reviews. But a lot of times, it won't even matter. They're just cutting numbers, and your name is just one of those numbers. So get your house in order, because as people on these apps are saying right now, Americans are closer to being on Snap than they are to being a billionaire, right? We're closer to being on Snap, right? It used to be people were 2-3 paychecks away, and now it's like 2.5 paychecks or 2 paychecks. So, yeah. Maybe there is a storm coming. Wall Street and the White House doesn't matter, because those companies make money regardless, because the institutional investors will see to it, right? Will see to it, but they don't see to the employees. They will cheer. You see Amazon stock and those stocks of those companies, when they announce layoffs, their stock go up because the investors are happy that they're getting rid of salaries and benefits. So I think we're in for a bumpy ride. And I think this is the first wave. So do what you can to make sure you're prepared for the second and third wave, because that's when it hits most Americans.
So he's right on the money, and I think he's completely spot on. It's not even just as well companies trying to shore up their books to look good for investors. There's a couple other factors as well, as AI investment is ramping up. Companies are trying to prepare for that as well. So they're trying to offload human labor in order to shore up their books, to make them look good to potential investors and show that they are moving towards AI. So that's why you're seeing a lot of movement towards AI integration. Even if AI isn't replacing humans one-to-one yet, I think a lot of companies are still positioning for it. But I think he's absolutely right. And I wrote a book all about this, and I have a whole chapter about what you can do about it. And there's an entire chapter dedicated to your finances, because I think this is a big part of it. Like I said, a couple moments ago, there's not going to be the hourly and the retail jobs that people think they're going to fall back on to cover their bases when job losses happen. So, like you said, first wave is already underway. A second wave is going to happen. There's going to be so many people who are looking for work. There's going to be a far greater supply of labor in the labor market than there is a supply of jobs. And so people are going to be competing for whatever they can get. And if retail jobs and service jobs are actually in just as bad of a state as white collar jobs, that means you're not going to get whatever safety net job working at a grocery store or waiting tables that you think you're going to get. That's going to leave you with gig work. And gig work as well is slowly falling to the, well, not slowly, rapidly falling to the wayside. They're already starting to make moves to automate. I mean, you have Waymo here in Austin that does ride partnerships with Uber. Robotaxi is here as well. Waymo just announced a partnership, I think in Phoenix, with DoorDash. So they'll be doing automated food delivery there. And so you're going to have people who are clamoring onto these gig apps looking for whatever is left that they can salvage out of their employment. And it's going to be a race to the bottom in wages. So you're going to have people willing to work for scraps. And some people just aren't going to be able to keep up. So I have a whole chapter dedicated to this in the book. It talks about what you can and should do. And yeah, like you need to build an emergency fund. How much you can save, that's up to you. Figure out your own financial situation. But whatever financial advice you're accustomed to reading on personal finance blogs, just coming from someone who previously was a freelance writer for a lot of these content creators, just throw it out the window. It's a bunch of malarkey. It doesn't make any sense. All these people aren't even qualified to give you the advice they're giving you. Just don't listen to them. You need to really actually look at your numbers, crunch them, figure out how much you need, and create a runway for yourself so that when you lose your job, you have enough to tide you over. Because like he said, there's a lot more people who are closer to becoming SNAP recipients than billionaires. And unfortunately, because that safety net is cracking, there's not going to be enough SNAP benefits for everyone. So you're going to be in for a world of hurt if you're not preparing now, not preparing for what's to come. And so start saving up, start working overtime, start figuring out, what you need to have in the bank to make sure you can tide yourself over and buy yourself some time. I think that's what a lot of this is. It's buying yourself time. The people who have flexibility, they're not necessarily going to become the winners of the AI revolution, right? I think we all know that the tech oligarchs out in Silicon Valley, they're the ones who are going to come out ahead, and the big institutional investors. The average person isn't. But your preparedness now is going to be the difference between you having some degree of social mobility and you becoming a member of the permanent poverty class. And I think with the world we're heading into, we're not going to have the same degree of social mobility that all of us are accustomed to. So if you slip into poverty, I think it's going to be incredibly unlikely that you will ever come out of it. So your goal right now, as dark as this sounds, is to stay out of poverty. So you need to do whatever it takes to make sure you either are self-sufficient outside of the system and you can survive on your own, or if you're still participating in the system, you have your house in order so you do not fall into poverty.
Stories are endless. There are so many people experiencing mass layoffs right now at their current employer, people that have been working for their jobs for a number of years, and then people that just recently got hired. I mean, it's going on over and over and over. You constantly see these stories. And I have a list here of the major layoffs that are hitting January 2026. And this is not a be-all end-all list. It's just the big employers that are already making these announcements. So number one, I have Tyson Foods. If you're not familiar with Tyson Foods, they are a major meat processing plant. We used to have one nearby us. It was a giant chicken factory, and they are responsible for supplying a lot of meat throughout the United States. And right now they have announced that they are closing their beef processing plant in Lexington, Nebraska. 3,200 jobs are going to be lost when this plant is shut down in January. 3,200 jobs. That is so much. Can you imagine being in a city, a town where all of a sudden 3,200 people are laid off? We're seeing this all across the board in a lot of places.
So the book I referenced before, I'll link in the description because I think it's well worth reading about Janesville and what happened there with the GM plant closure in 2008. One of the things you have to consider with a lot of these factory towns and these towns built around employers like Tyson is that a lot of the town itself exists to support those workers. So you have mom and pop restaurants that basically their primary clientele are people who are going to work at those places. You have other vendors and suppliers. So an example from Janesville is the book highlighted two women who worked at, I think, like a seatbelt or a seat manufacturer. So there was another company in that town in Wisconsin that produced other components that went into the GM vehicles. So it wasn't just guys working on the GM factory floor. It was suppliers producing components for GM. So once GM closed, the demand for those suppliers' products diminished. They had no one to provide to, so they closed up shop too. So I suspect, I'm not sure if this is 3,200 in total or if it's 3,200 just at Tyson, but I suspect if it's just at Tyson, the number's probably gonna be far bigger if you account for all the other downstream workers who are affected and directly related to the business that Tyson runs in that community.
Then we have FedEx. They're closing a facility in Texas, Coppell, Texas, Coppell, I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's Coppell, resulting in almost 900 layoffs. This is going to be in late January. They say it's part of operational changes and client restructuring. You know, restructuring is a word that, I mean, it's almost one of the buzzwords of 2025. It's been going around so much. We constantly hear about companies that are downsizing, doing all of these layoffs because they are restructuring. And a lot of that is just, you know, a word to use to kind of cover them, because basically they are realizing that things are changing, the economy's changing, and they a lot of times want to adapt new technologies that involve AI. And so what they say is that they are restructuring. So that's been a buzzword just really going around. Then we
Restructuring too in this context also means flattening, so organizational flattening. So they're getting rid of the number of layers of management between the rank and file producing workers at the very bottom and the people running the company at the top. So a lot of management level positions are also going to be affected by this. They're flattening organizations, getting rid of excess and redundant workers, and they're not backfilling those positions. They're just completely eliminating them.
have General Motors, 1,140 workers to be laid off at Factory Zero in Detroit, Michigan, effective January 5th, 2026. Can you imagine that? All of these people, you go through the holidays, you know, you're hopeful for 2026, you're hopeful for the new year, and you're told that there's going to be major layoffs. Maybe the employer didn't even come out and tell you first. Maybe you just heard it from the news. I don't really know, but it's just terrible. That is so many jobs. And it says here that they are doing these cuts because of slower adoption of electric vehicles. Maybe they were anticipating a lot more EVs being sold. I know there are a lot of people that are into electric vehicles, and then there are a lot of people that are not. And it's something that, you know, I don't know what's going to happen with the future with EVs. It's been pushed so much, but there's a lot of people that are reluctant to kind of jump on board to get an electric vehicle. And I can understand why, you know, and I can understand the arguments on both ends. But right now, this is what's going on. But then, you know, they are pushing for EVs, right? So we'll see what really happens here. But these are just some major companies that have announced layoffs. 2025 has already been so crazy when it comes to layoffs. I mean, it's like worse than the pandemic. So many people right now are going without work, and they are looking for work and they can't find it. And they're having to accept jobs with lower pay, and then those jobs end up doing layoffs as well. It's a really bad situation right now. If you have a job, you're working, keep that job, do what you can to keep that job. If you're looking for something else, don't quit your job until you get something else. And for those of you out there that are looking for work, I wish you the best in this new year. I hope that you get something really soon, because it's crucial right now, obviously, as ever, but it's crucial to have employment and be able to position yourselves for, you know, the times that are ahead of us. And I want to go back to the new podcast that I was telling you about. You know, we're going to be touching on so many of these different topics. What's going on geopolitically?
Okay, yeah, definitely. If you're interested, definitely subscribe to their podcast. Sounds like it would be interesting. But I think she really captures what is happening. It's, you know, we've already been seeing this since the recession in 2008. A lot of your hourly, your blue collar, your factory workers were already experiencing what is now affecting white collar workers. And it's starting at the lower end of white collar work and working its way up the food chain. And I think it's only going to get worse from here. Because this is typically the traditional middle class in America. These are the folks who are supposed to be able to buy homes, start families, spend a little money, go to Disney World, and live the American dream. And that is no longer viable. And then, of course, you're just seeing an explosion of political animus across the country, because you are seeing in real time people who aren't necessarily paying into the system, people who aren't working hard, people who have no interest in furthering the American dream, benefiting from all the taxes that we are paying into the government that is supposed to be providing us with safety, security, and now, you know, welfare benefits in return. So we're not getting the return on investment that we're supposed to be getting from working. And so I think a lot of people are like, well, what's the point? If I can't buy a house, raise a family, and if all my tax dollars are being siphoned away to go, you know, support Somali pirates in Minnesota, you know, what's the point? And so I think a lot of people are also having an existential spiritual crisis with this as well, because they do see the writing on the wall. They do recognize that financially this is no longer sustainable and that there's just no real point to it anymore. So I think this is going to boil over, and this is going to be a major catalyst for further conflict within the country. So definitely stay on top of where layoffs are happening. These are signposts that tell you where the economy is going, and the continuation of more and more layoffs in the first, second, and third wave, like the gentleman said, will give you an indication of how severe things are going to get. And just keep in mind context from the past 20 years, where things you thought were they're true based on your own experiences or based on what you heard on the news, weren't necessarily what was happening in the real world on Main Street. And so I think the hens have come to roost, and we are going to have to pay the consequences of the choices that we have made over the past several decades, and we're in for a very bumpy ride. So definitely share your thoughts. Let me know what you think. If you've experienced layoffs as well, I'd love to know your perspective and where you see the job market heading this year. Like I said, I've written a book outlining a framework to kind of help you guide you through where I think this transition is going. You can get that on Amazon. I'll leave a link in the description as well. Thank you as always for tuning in. I appreciate it. If you like this video, definitely like, subscribe, and share with anyone you know, and I'll see you in the next video.